Hey, I'm Liz Wald, and it's Web3 Wednesday. This week, I'm going to cover a recent article and interview that was penned and given by Marc Andreessen, who is one of the most prolific and successful VCs of our era and the founder of A16Z, which is a VC firm out in California in the Valley. And he basically wrote this big kind of get it off your chest article as to why AI will save the world and not destroy it. He's very optimistic, and after writing the article, there was a podcast done interviewing him about these thoughts. And I will link to both the article and the podcast below so you can dive in more deeply. But essentially it comes down to a couple of things. One, he has no fear of singularity, and two, he thinks utopia is possible. So first, singularity. This is the idea that technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible and leads to unforeseen changes that generally are negative. Kind of the idea that the robots are coming for us. And he actually talks about how he thinks in our world of entertainment, movies and gaming and the like, we've replaced the Nazis as the bad guy, as, these sentient robots as the bad guy. And it's giving everyone a lot of, fodder to buy into this fear that AI is, going to build these sentient robots and the world is going to end. So throughout his interview, yes, he's a bit Pollyannish, and he's certainly self-interested because he's investing in all of these AI-based companies. He simplifies things a bit like, hey, if people just weren't idiots and didn't misunderstand economics, everything would be fine and we wouldn't have had communism or socialism, capitalism is the way, etc. And yes, all of that is true, but he does make some thoughtful points, and I do think it's worth a read or a listen. Okay, so the utopia side. Basically, he's saying that everybody will have their own personal AI assistants, maybe dozens of them, that will do things for you that you don't really want to do. Add milk to your shopping list, send your electric car out on errands, whatever it is, but we will be so efficient and we will only focus on the highest level things. And essentially the creative people will have all these tools to be even more creative. It's basically like, hey, Steven Spielberg isn't going to go away. Steven Spielberg is going to be 20 times more efficient and be able to write all these new movies and conceive them and all of these things. So he thinks that when this happens, we will live much richer lives, both literally and figuratively. And that, maybe we will only be concerned with just amazing, creative, handmade things, kind of going sort of back in time. Rather than, all of the machine type things can be done by other machines. So that's one concept. He also says that, this idea of the paperclip problem, which is essentially this theory that, somebody will program a machine to say all we need in the whole world is paperclips, and that these machines will get so smart that they will convert all people and every atom that is out there in the world into producing these relatively useless things, and the world will come to an end because we will have no more food or any other thing. And he essentially says, look, if the machines are smart enough to do that, they're also smart enough to know it's a bad idea, so he's not really too worried about that problem. And he even goes on to say that warfare will be safer because of AI. Now, if we have this world of utopia, I'm not sure we even have warfare, but he doesn't really go into that. But he does say that, because we'll have so much better information, we won't have this fog of war problem. We won't have friendly fire because we'll know exactly who the enemy is, and probably we'll have fewer actual humans out on the battlefield anyway, so that warfare will actually become safer and not this like dystopian future with the robots coming for us. So he also warns about how we can screw it up. And he talks a lot about this concept of Baptists and bootleggers, which was an economic theory developed around in the 80s, kind of using prohibition as an example. It basically said, when support comes from either a moral standpoint and an economic standpoint, that those two things kind of force economic regulation in a way that is not beneficial, because the Baptists, the so-called evangelists, and all the people that thought alcohol was going to be the scourge of America and we need to prohibit it entirely, were like pushing for regulation. And the bootleggers, who had a huge economic interest in having this regulation so they could run a completely illegal underground business, were all for it as well, for very different reasons, and kind of encouraged the Baptists to get their laws passed and paid the lobbyists and all of this, and it end up with this regulation that really was not a benefit to society at all. And so this Baptist and bootleggers problem is one that he's starting to see as a potential for today, where we're trying to regulate AI and maybe only give a few people all the power around it for a while. And he thinks that's just a bad idea, and that the market really should be free and open to develop. And he also just talks a lot about people's just irrational fears because they don't understand, quote unquote, the bigger picture and all of these things, which again is kind of like, let's let the smart guys and hopefully a couple women in the room run things, as opposed to, letting the people who don't know make the decision. So overall, I think it's worth a read or listen, and I would love to get your thoughts. So comment below. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week on Web3 Wednesday.